The flight home had lasted nearly 14 hours. Long enough for sleep to come and go. Long enough for continents to disappear beneath clouds. Long enough for Seoul to become a memory. Washington, D.C. greeted Naomi Brooks with familiar certainty. The marble facades. The broad avenues lined with monuments. The quiet confidence of a city where decisions shaped governments, businesses, and lives around the world. It was home, and after years of building her consultancy one client, one negotiation, and one hard-earned reputation at a time, it was exactly where she belonged. The weeks that followed settled quickly into a familiar rhythm. Morning strategy meetings, client presentations, contract negotiations, evening flights to New York, Toronto, and Chicago. Her calendar remained comfortably full. But something had changed. The conference in Seoul had opened doors Naomi hadn't expected. Organizations throughout Asia had begun requesting her by name. A logistics firm headquartered in Singapore wanted her advice on an international partnership. A Tokyo technology company sought her expertise on cross-cultural negotiations. A Seoul investment consortium requested a series of executive workshops before the end of the quarter. The inquiries arrived steadily, each one reinforcing the same realization. Her work in Seoul hadn't ended when her plane left Korea. It had only begun. Late one afternoon, Naomi stepped out of a meeting near Georgetown with a notebook tucked beneath her arm. The early autumn air carried the scent of roasted barley from a nearby tea shop. She stopped almost instinctively. The aroma was unmistakable. For just a moment, she wasn't standing on a quiet Washington sidewalk. She was back on a terrace overlooking the Han River, a warm ceramic cup resting between her hands, while Seoul shimmered beneath the evening sky. In Korea, tea isn't always about the tea. It's about making time. A small smile found her before she even realized it. The memory passed as naturally as it had arrived. She glanced at her watch. Her next meeting began in 12 minutes. Life, as always, continued moving forward. She crossed the street, disappearing once more into the steady rhythm of the city. Yet somewhere beneath the momentum of deadlines and negotiations, Seoul no longer felt like a place she had visited. It had quietly become a place she intended to know better. By the beginning of the next quarter, the pattern had become impossible to ignore. What had started as a handful of inquiries had quietly become a steady stream of opportunity. Nearly every week, another email arrived from somewhere in Asia. A manufacturing firm in Busan, a financial group in Tokyo, a technology company in Singapore. Each request carried a familiar theme: cross-cultural negotiation, international partnerships, executive leadership. Naomi accepted each assignment with the same disciplined approach that had built her reputation. She never chased growth. She prepared for it. One Tuesday morning, her leadership team gathered in the firm's conference room overlooking downtown Washington. Charts filled the large presentation screen. Client growth, regional demand, projected expansion. Her operations director clicked to the next slide. The room grew noticeably quieter. A map of the world appeared. Nearly half of the firm's new international business now originated in Asia. Naomi leaned forward. "I knew we'd grown. I didn't realize we'd grown that much." Her operations director smiled. "Neither did we." He changed slides again. A list of recent client feedback filled the screen. Several comments mentioned the same conference, the Seoul Global Economic Partnership Forum. One client wrote, "Ms. Brooks understands how cultural awareness creates business advantage." Another simply said, "Request Naomi Brooks specifically." For a moment, the room was silent, not because anyone was surprised by Naomi's success, because they had finally identified where the momentum was coming from. Her colleague Marcus broke the silence. "I've been thinking about something." Naomi looked toward him. "If this trend continues," he gestured toward the map, "we're eventually going to spend more time flying to Asia than working in Washington." A few people laughed. Marcus didn't. "I'm serious." He folded his hands. "At some point, it might make more sense to open an office there." The room became thoughtful, not excited. thoughtful. No one rushed to answer. Naomi studied the map quietly. Washington, London, Singapore, Tokyo, Seoul. The names were no longer simply destinations. They were relationships. Finally she spoke. Opening an office halfway around the world isn't a decision you make because business is good. Marcus nodded. I know. You make it because you believe the opportunity will still be there 10 years from now. Another quiet pause. Marcus smiled. So, do you? Naomi looked once more at the screen. Then, almost to herself, she answered. I think Asia is no longer a market we serve. She smiled thoughtfully. I think it's becoming part of who we are. Nearly 7,000 miles away, Seoul continued moving with the same quiet precision it always had. Morning commuters filled the subway platforms. Street vendors prepared for another day. The Han River reflected the first light of dawn as glass towers awakened across the city skyline. For Kang Min-jun, routine remained a discipline. His mornings began before sunrise. An hour of exercise, a simple breakfast, an uninterrupted review of reports before the first meeting of the day. Some habits were preferences. Others were necessities. Responsibility had a way of demanding consistency. By 8 o'clock, the executive boardroom overlooking Gangnam was already filled. Quarterly financial results, international partnerships, community investments, foundation initiatives. The conversations moved efficiently from one subject to the next. No raised voices, no wasted words. When the final presentation concluded, the screen changed one last time. Hanseong Foundation Annual Gala. Historic temple restoration projects appeared alongside scholarship recipients, cultural exhibitions, and international educational partnerships. Min-jun studied the presentation with quiet satisfaction. His executive director looked toward him. We finalized this year's cultural preservation grants. Min-jun nodded. And the scholarship recipients? 32. A faint smile crossed his face. Excellent. The meeting adjourned. As the executives quietly departed, only 2 people remained in the boardroom. Min-jun and Ji-eun, executive director of the Hanseong Foundation. She placed a leather portfolio before him. Our international guest recommendations. Min-jun opened it. Artists, architects, historians, diplomats, business leaders, educators. Each invitation reflected the foundation's purpose, to preserve Korea's cultural heritage while building meaningful relationships with the wider world. He turned another page. Then another. His hand paused. Naomi Brooks. Ji-eun noticed immediately. The advisory committee was unanimous. They felt Ms. Brooks embodied exactly what the foundation hopes to encourage. She glanced at her notes. Several members attended her presentation during the Global Economic Partnership Forum. They were especially impressed by the way she spoke about cultural understanding as a strategic advantage rather than simply good manners. Min-jun looked at Naomi's profile for another quiet moment. They have excellent judgment. Ji-eun smiled. So we'll extend the invitation. He closed the portfolio gently. Yes. A thoughtful pause settled between them. But make certain the invitation reflects the foundation's purpose. Nothing more. She understood immediately. Of course. After Ji-eun left, silence returned to the boardroom. Min-jun walked toward the windows overlooking Seoul. The city stretched endlessly beneath the afternoon light. Always evolving, never forgetting where it came from. His thoughts drifted, if only briefly, to another conversation overlooking that same city. Terrace. 2 cups of barley tea. A woman who had looked beyond influence and reputation to ask whether solitude and loneliness were truly the same thing. He realized something that surprised even him. He couldn't remember the last conference where one conversation had remained with him long after the delegates had gone home. Not because it had been charming, because it had been honest. There had been no performance, no expectation, only genuine curiosity. He returned to his desk, opened a blank email, and began to write. Washington welcomed another busy morning. By 9 o'clock, Naomi's office had settled into its familiar rhythm. Phones rang softly, Coffee cups found their places beside open laptops. Assistants moved efficiently from one meeting to the next. Outside her office window, the city moved with quiet determination. Inside, Naomi reviewed a proposal for a multinational logistics client when her executive assistant, Claire, appeared at the doorway. "You have a moment?" Naomi smiled. "For you? Always." Claire stepped inside carrying an elegant cream envelope. "The courier asked that this be placed directly into your hands." Naomi accepted it. The paper was thick, beautifully textured, tastefully understated. She turned it over. Embossed in deep charcoal foil was a simple crest. Hanseong Foundation. She paused. Not because she recognized the organization, because something about its quiet elegance immediately conveyed significance. After Claire left, Naomi carefully opened the envelope. Inside rested a beautifully printed invitation. The Hanseong Foundation cordially invites Ms. Naomi Brooks to attend the annual Foundation Gala, celebrating Korean cultural heritage, international educational exchange, and global leadership. Beneath the invitation rested a small handwritten correspondence card. Naomi unfolded it. The handwriting was immediately familiar. "Ms. Brooks, your perspective contributed meaningfully to this year's Global Economic Partnership Forum. Should your schedule permit, it would be our honor to welcome you to Seoul once again as a guest of the Hanseong Foundation. Respectfully, Kang Min-jun." Naomi read the note once, then quietly read it again. Not because it contained hidden meaning, because every word sounded exactly as she remembered him. Thoughtful, measured, respectful. She placed the note beside the invitation and looked toward the windows overlooking Washington. The city remained exactly as she had left it. Confident, purposeful, home. Her eyes drifted toward the framed world map hanging beside her bookshelf. They settled almost instinctively on Seoul. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Marcus stepped inside. "Everything all right?" Naomi handed him the invitation. He read silently for several moments. "The Hanseong Foundation." He looked back at her. "That's a remarkable invitation." "So I gathered. They're one of the most respected cultural organizations in Korea." He handed it back. "You know, if we're seriously considering expanding into Asia, this isn't simply a gala. It's an opportunity." Naomi nodded thoughtfully. "I was thinking the same thing." She returned to her desk, opened a new email, and began typing. Subject: Hanseong Foundation Annual Gala. "Mr. Kang, thank you for your thoughtful invitation. I would be honored to attend this year's Hanseong Foundation Gala. I believe, however, that I will be attending under somewhat different circumstances than either of us anticipated. Since returning from Seoul, my firm's work throughout Asia has grown considerably, and we are actively exploring the possibility of establishing our regional office in Seoul. It seems our conversation about international partnerships proved more insightful than either of us realized. I look forward to seeing your city again. Respectfully, Naomi Brooks." She read the message one final time, made a single correction, then pressed send. 7,000 miles away, a quiet notification appeared on Kang Min-jun's computer. He glanced toward the screen. From Naomi Brooks. His expression remained composed. Yet the faintest smile touched the corner of his mouth. Not because he knew what she had written, but because, across an ocean, a conversation he had genuinely hoped might continue, had just begun again. The weeks that followed passed quickly. Conference calls stretched across time zones. Late-night strategy sessions became early morning meetings. The closer Naomi looked at the numbers, the clearer the answer became. Asia was no longer an emerging opportunity. It was becoming an essential part of her firm's future. One afternoon, Marcus stepped into her office carrying a familiar blue folder. "I think we've reached a decision." Naomi looked up. "Have we?" He placed the folder on her desk. "I think we've reached a point where we owe ourselves a closer look." She opened the folder. Across the top of the first page were 4 words. Seoul Regional Office Assessment. Marcus continued. "We're not committing to anything. We're gathering information. He smiled. And since you already have reason to be there, he gestured toward the Hanseong Foundation invitation resting neatly beside her calendar. It makes sense to accomplish both. Naomi nodded. I was hoping you'd say that. Within days, the trip began to take shape. The Hanseong Foundation Gala would anchor the visit. Around it, meetings quickly filled her calendar. Commercial real estate firms, legal advisors, financial institutions, technology partners, university representatives. Every appointment answered a different question. Could Seoul support the firm's long-term vision? Could it become more than a destination? Could it become a home for the next chapter of the business? One evening, after the office had emptied, Naomi remained alone reviewing her itinerary. She traced each appointment carefully. There was comfort in preparation. It had always been her way. Yet this itinerary felt different. Not because it was fuller, because every page pointed toward the same city. Her phone vibrated softly. A calendar reminder. Departure Washington to Seoul. 3 days. She leaned back in her chair. Outside, the lights of Washington shimmered across the evening sky. Home. Steady. Reliable. She wondered, almost absent-mindedly, what Seoul looked like at that exact moment. Morning, perhaps. Rush hour beginning. The cafes opening. The Han River catching the first light. Some cities left photographs. Others left impressions. Seoul had left questions. Questions she found herself looking forward to answering. Across the Pacific, Kang Min-jun reviewed the final preparations for the Hanseong Foundation Gala. Scholarship recipients had confirmed. International guests had begun arriving. Cultural performances had completed rehearsals. Everything appeared exactly as planned. June entered with the updated guest list. Most of our international guests have arrived. She paused. Ms. Brooks lands Friday afternoon. Min-jun accepted the list with a quiet nod. Has transportation been arranged? Yes. And accommodations? Everything has been confirmed. He closed the folder. Good. June hesitated just long enough to ask one more question. Would you like to greet our international guests personally? Min-jun considered it, then smiled faintly. I greet all of our international guests personally. Let's continue that tradition. June smiled in return. I thought you might. When she left, Min-jun looked once toward the city beyond his office windows. In only a few days, a conversation interrupted by an ocean would quietly begin again. Morning arrived over the Pacific long before either city awakened. High above the clouds, Naomi rested comfortably beside the airplane window. The familiar leather notebook lay tucked safely inside her carry-on. This journey felt different from the last. The first time she had flown to Seoul, she carried expectations. This time, she carried intentions. The hours passed quietly. Continents drifted beneath endless stretches of cloud. Somewhere over the northern Pacific, Naomi opened her notebook once more. She found the page she had written only days before. 2 entries. 2 moments separated by time. Find more reasons to return to Seoul. Beneath it, this time, I'm going to discover whether opportunity can become permanence. She looked at the words for a long moment, then gently closed the notebook. Some thoughts were meant to remain exactly as they had been written. By late afternoon, the aircraft descended through soft clouds toward Incheon International Airport. As the coastline came into view, something unexpected happened. Nothing felt unfamiliar. The orderly highways, the clusters of apartment towers, the distant outline of the city. Even the gentle cadence of Korean announcements drifting through the cabin felt strangely comforting. She smiled to herself, not because she had returned, because returning no longer felt extraordinary. Simply felt right. Outside the terminal, a courteous driver waited beside a black luxury sedan. He bowed politely. Ms. Brooks, welcome back to Seoul. The words surprised her more than she expected. Welcome back. Not welcome. Back. The drive into the city unfolded beneath a golden evening sky. Traffic flowed steadily along the expressway. The Han River shimmered in the fading sunlight. Cyclists followed riverside paths. Families gathered in riverside parks. Office towers reflected the colors of approaching dusk. Naomi watched quietly through the window. The city no longer introduced itself. Instead, it seemed to be continuing a conversation they had started weeks before. Her hotel overlooked the Han River. Elegant, understated, the kind of place where thoughtful design spoke louder than extravagance. The concierge welcomed her warmly. "Ms. Brooks, we're honored to host you during your visit. Your accommodations have been arranged through the Hanseong Foundation." As she entered her suite, floor-to-ceiling windows immediately drew her attention. Beyond the glass, Seoul stretched endlessly beneath the evening sky. Alive, confident, beautiful. Her suitcase remained unopened near the door. Instead, she walked directly to the window. The city seemed somehow both familiar and entirely new. Her phone vibrated softly. A message. "June. Ms. Brooks, welcome back to Seoul. I hope your journey was comfortable. We look forward to welcoming you tomorrow evening at the Hanseong Foundation Gala. If there is anything you require during your stay, please don't hesitate to let us know." Naomi smiled. Professional, warm, thoughtful, exactly as she expected. She slipped the phone into her pocket, then reached into her carry-on and removed the worn leather notebook. She opened it to the same familiar page. Her eyes settled once again on the two handwritten entries. "Find more reasons to return to Seoul. This time, I'm going to discover whether opportunity can become permanence." For a brief moment, she considered writing something more. Instead, she quietly closed the notebook. Some journeys deserved to unfold before they were described. She returned to the window. Far below, the lights of Seoul reflected across the Han River like countless strokes of ink across dark paper. Tomorrow, the city would continue writing its story. And so would she. Across the city, inside the Hanseong Foundation headquarters, final preparations continued long after sunset. Fresh floral arrangements lined the entrance hall. Historic calligraphy scrolls had been carefully installed inside the exhibition gallery. Scholarship recipients rehearsed their acceptance remarks one final time. Every detail reflected the foundation's quiet commitment to preserving Korea's past while investing in its future. In his office overlooking the river, Kang Min-jun reviewed the final program for the evening's gala. June stepped quietly inside. "All of our international guests have arrived." Min-jun nodded without looking up. "The welcome reception begins at 6. She smiled. "Ms. Brooks checked in about an hour ago." His pen paused almost imperceptibly above the page. Then he continued reading. "Thank you. Nothing more." June inclined her head and quietly left the office. Silence settled once again. Min-jun rose from his desk and walked toward the windows. The city stretched endlessly before him. The same skyline, the same river, the same evening. Somewhere beyond the lights, Naomi Brooks had returned to Seoul, not as a passing visitor, but as someone beginning to imagine a future there. A faint smile touched his face. Not anticipation, gratitude, for the rare opportunity to continue a conversation worth having. The lights of the city shimmered beneath the night sky. Two people, one city, neither realizing that tomorrow would quietly change both of their lives. Naomi had found her reasons to return to Seoul. Business, opportunity, possible future. And somewhere across the city, Min-jun knew she was back. They hadn't seen each other yet. But tomorrow, the conversation would begin again. Do you think distance changed what was growing between them or made it stronger? Tell me what you think in the comments.